Chapter 4, Carbohydrates. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the functions of carbohydrates, name primary sources of carbohydrates, and describe the classification of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are a primary source of energy for the body. They're rapidly oxidized in order to release energy, and their byproduct is heat. It is also the least expensive and most abundant of the energy nutrients. Carbohydrates are named for the chemical elements that compose them. These include carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The main functions of carbohydrates are to provide energy, to spare protein, to maintain normal fat metabolism, and to provide fiber. Major function of carbohydrates is to provide energy. Each gram of carbohydrates provides 4 calories. A half a day's supply of carbohydrates are stored in the liver and muscles for use as needed in the form of glycogen. Carbohydrates prevent protein from being used as energy. Protein is used to build and repair tissue. Carbohydrates needs to be ingested in enough amounts so that protein is not used. Without an adequate supply of carbohydrates, such is the case in certain diets, fat is metabolized or broken down to meet energy requirements. Incomplete oxidation of fat produces ketones. Ketones are acids that accumulate in the blood and urine. It may lead to a dangerous condition called ketoacidosis. Here is a depiction of the signs of ketoacidosis. If left to progress, it can cause serious things such as loss of consciousness, coma, arrhythmias, seizures, and nausea and vomiting. Brainstorming. What concerns would you share with your patient who wants to start a high-protein, low-carbohydrate diet, such as Atkins or South Beach type of diet? Remember that carbohydrates are necessary for energy. Not enough can put your body into ketoacidosis, and protein is better used for building and repairing tissue. Fiber is a type of carbohydrate the body can't digest. Though most carbohydrates are broken down into sugar molecules, fiber cannot be broken down into sugar molecules, and instead it passes through the body undigested. Fiber helps regulate the body's use of sugars, helping to keep hunger and blood sugar in check. Fiber works to lower blood glucose levels. It may also prevent some colon cancers. It also helps to prevent constipation, hemorrhoids, and diverticular disease by softening stool. The principal sources of carbohydrates are plant-based. Things such as cereal grains, legumes, vegetables, fruits, and sugars are all good sources of carbohydrates. The only substantial animal source of carbohydrates is milk. Next, we look at the classifications of carbohydrates. They're classified as monosaccharides, which are simple sugars. Next are disaccharides, which are double sugars, and polysaccharides, which are your complex carbohydrates. Monosaccharides are the basic building blocks of carbohydrates. They are also the simplest form of carbohydrates. They are absorbed directly into the bloodstream from the small intestines. These include glucose, fructose, and galactose. Glucose is a monosaccharide that is also known as dextrose. It is the form of carbohydrate to which all other forms are converted for eventual metabolism. It's naturally found in berries, grapes, sweet corn, and corn syrup, and is the only fuel used by the central nervous system, brain, and red blood cells. Fructose is also known as levulose or fruit sugar. It is also a monosaccharide, and it's found in ripe fruits and honey, and it is the sweetest of all monosaccharides. Galactose is the last monosaccharide we will discuss. It is produced in the digestion of milk, and it's not found naturally. It is derived from lactose. Disaccharides are pairs of monosaccharides. They must be changed to simple sugars by hydrolysis before absorption. They include sucrose, maltose, and lactose. Sucrose is a disaccharide that is composed of glucose and fructose, hence the name two sugars, and it's present in granulated sugar. It's also one of the sweetest and least expensive sugars. Next is maltose. It is the result of digestion of grain, and you get that through fermentation that produces alcohol. Maltose also is found in some infant formulas. It's also not as sweet as glucose or sucrose. Lastly, lactose. It's a sugar found in milk. It's not found in plants, and it helps the body to absorb calcium. It is not as sweet as monosaccharides or other disaccharides. Lactose intolerance is very common. It is caused by insufficient lactase. Lactase is the enzyme needed to break down the lactose. Lab tests, as well as hydrogen breath tests, can be used to assist with the diagnosis. Test begins with the initial breath sample, followed by ingesting the lactose, and then as your body breaks it down, the patient is instructed to breathe in a bag every 15 to 20 minutes, and then the physician takes out the air and tests that sample. Polysaccharides are complex carbohydrates. They're compounds of many monosaccharides, and they're important for nutrition because they make up starch, glycogen, and fiber. Starches are found in grains and vegetables, and it is stored in the form of glucose in plants. It also supplies energy over longer periods of time because it takes the body longer to digest them than monosaccharides or disaccharides. Glycogen is a very important polysaccharide as it is stored in the form of glucose in the body. There is a hormone called glucagon, which helps the liver convert glycogen into glucose as needed for energy. Fiber is indigestible, meaning that it cannot be broken down by digestive enzymes, and it comes in two forms: insoluble and soluble. Insoluble does not dissolve readily in water, and soluble partially. Soluble fiber does partially dissolve in water, and there is a packaged or commercially sourced form of it, and it's packaged as Metamucil or something similar to that. This slide helps to illustrate the differences between insoluble fiber and soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber can come in the forms of vegetables and beans, where you get that stringy material, and then soluble fibers, which are your fruit and whole grains. Sources of polysaccharides include starch and glycogen. Starches come in the forms of cereals, grains, potatoes, corn, beans, and yams. Glycogen is derived from glucose, which is stored in the liver and in muscles. Cellulose is another source of polysaccharides. It comes in the forms of wheat, bran, whole grains, and cereals. There's also something called hemicellulose, which comes only in whole grains. And there's another form called lignans, which is the woody part of vegetables, and it's not really a carbohydrate. When looking at digestion and absorption, monosaccharides are absorbed from the intestines directly into the bloodstream. They're then carried to the liver, and they're changed to glucose. Glucose is then carried to the cells. In order for digestion of disaccharides to occur, enzymes are required. Enzymes such as sucrase, maltase, and lactase are needed to convert sucrose, maltose, and lactose into a usable form. The digestion and absorption of polysaccharides is a lot more complex. The digestibility does vary due to this, and the cellulose wall has to be broken down. Starches need to be changed to an intermediate product, which will finally convert to glucose. Digestion starts in the mouth, and salivary amylase begins to change that starch to dextrin. In the stomach, the food mixes with gastric juices, And in the small intestines, the digestible carbohydrates will change to simple sugars by action of the pancreatic amylase and absorbed into the blood. The islets of Langerhans are cells that are located in the pancreas, and they secrete insulin. Insulin is required for glucose metabolism. Any impairment to this process will result in high blood glucose levels, which is also called hyperglycemia. Low glucose can occur at a level of 70 milligrams per deciliter, and it can occur if a person takes in too much insulin or has insufficient food intake, which can cause hypoglycemia. And these are the symptoms here listed on the screen. It is recommended that adults receive half of their energy requirements from complex carbohydrates and receive only 10% from simple forms of carbohydrates. Weight loss and fatigue can result from diets that are deficient in carbohydrates. In severe deficiencies, ketoacidosis can occur. When there's a surplus of carbohydrates, adipose tissue can form, causing weight gain. In conclusion, carbohydrates should be a major source of energy. Nutrients can spare protein, maintain normal fat metabolism, and provide fiber. Excessive intake of the wrong type of carbohydrate can lead to obesity, cavities, and digestive disturbances.